everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and by goodness, it's my favourite time of the week. That's right, it's week 7 of Wrestlers of the Week. Not that week 7 specifically is my favourite time of the week, it's just always popping off on a Friday. Now last week was a little bit of a calmer week for Wrestlers of the Week, given the fact that Velveteen Dream won, despite only winning the bloody Worlds Collide tournament and putting on a great halftime heat show as well. But in terms of big shows, it wasn't that big. This week has been full of massive performances, yo. But before we get into that, let's just take a look at the honourable mentions. We've got to mention Phoenix and Pentagon, both of the Lucha Bros who won the Impact Tag Team titles from LAX recently. Although Phoenix is now sadly injured, we wish him a full and speedy recovery. Adam Cole had a really good match on NXT this week. Chad Gable was awesome in defeat on Monday Night Raw, and Daniel Bryan was also awesome in defeat on SmackDown Live. One or two of their opponents may be cropping up a little bit in the top 10, but we'll find that out in just a second. I should also mention that this weekend there are a couple of massive matches here in the UK and in Ireland as well. There's a match between Pac and Ospreay tonight in Rev Pro, and also there's a match between Pac and Volta over in Ireland in OTT. So that's insane. I don't know when to take those into account, however. I'm gonna have to do some research and find out exactly when they go on demand. Now, without any further ado, let's take a look at all of this week's Wrestlers of the Week. Number 10. Number 10 this week is my boy, Noam Dar. No pinky, no pie, lads. Scotland, yes. Love deep fried Mars bars and haggis and bagpipes and all that sort of stuff. Really nice to see some different guys be given the spotlight, of course, in the main event of 205 Live. I know that 205 Live provides a bit of a limited spotlight compared to the main rosters, and even NXT, I suppose. That's far more visible online than 205 Live is. No one really seems to talk about 205 Live that much, but this was another one of those events, main events of 205 Live, where they really proved themselves. So both Dar and Nice turned in great performances. Dar used a chair quite a lot in terms of like submissions and that sort of thing, because it's often a part of his game that's forgotten. I think when he was on the indies before he moved to WWE, his submission game was a little bit more emphasized, especially with that knee bar. He was using that to good effect in this match, but not good effect enough, because despite the submissions and despite all the crazy no DQ sort of weapons, moves and stuff they threw at each other, it was Nice who picked up the victory. But I don't think that Dar should be disheartened, because even though, yes, he's proven himself to be lower on the pecking order than his opponent, this is a good sign, and hopefully moving forwards we can see more of him in and around the main event scene, because he is a fantastic talent, despite often, I feel, being relegated to sort of comedy and that sort of thing, which he's good at, but at the same time, he's also very good in the ring. 1 point for Noam Dar. Number 9 on Wrestlers of the Week, picking up 2 points, and oh my god, it's been a long time coming. The Revival are finally Raw Tag Team Champions, and this week's number 9 is Big Scotty D, Scott Dawson. We can debate all we want for the reasons behind the Revival's eventual success, you know, the whole fact that people were speculating they're going to be going to AEW, rumours that they actually requested to go to AEW and then were then promised this tag title reign as sort of recompense, that sort of thing. But regardless of any of the rumoured reasons behind it, or maybe inaccurate reasons, we don't know, but regardless of all of that stuff, the important thing is that they won the match, they are the new tag team champions, and it was a very good match as well. The best match on Raw this week, and Dawson turned in a very handy performance for himself. He was then a bit of a naughty boy on Twitter, because his partner Dash Wilder tweeted a picture of the boys with photoshopped old school tag team titles around their waists, and then he quote retweeted it and put, "I prefer to call them belts," which is of course a word that Vince hates being used to describe his championships in the WWE. I can't linger on Dawson for too long, because next up on the list, number 8, picking up 3 points, is his partner Dash Wilder. Jack, how did you decide which one to give more points to? They both wrestled a fairly even match. I will explain my very scientific method, do not worry about that. Right, so basically, and I'm a little bit embarrassed about this, but I watched the match twice through, all the way through. I was like watching it specifically for this series, thinking, which one of them impressed more? And at first I thought, you know what, Dawson's wrestling better. He's selling, he's bumping. I felt like a proper nerd watching the match in this way, by the way. But then Wilder came in and he was working just as hard, and it was just so even. So why has Wilder picked up 1 extra point? It's literally, it boils down to this. It's literally because for the ending, if you haven't seen the match, the finish was like a shatter machine kind of out of nowhere. And I feel like Wilder, being the sort of code breaker part of the shatter machine, had a little bit more to do to sort of fly into position, and he nailed it perfectly. Dawson had less to do. He was in the sort of the Devon role, the hoisting role, and it was a little tiny bit off. I sound like such a nerd, but that's the reason why Wilder gets 1 extra point, okay? If you're ever wondering why I've given one tag team partner more points than another tag team partner, just ask me and I'll let you know. There is a method behind this madness. Number 7, we've mentioned his opponent already, but it's time to talk about Tony Nese. It's Tony time, ladies and gentlemen. Not Tony Storm, she's the NXT UK Women's Champion. Tony Nese, potentially future WWE Cruiserweight Champion. Who knows? The reason I say this is because, as I mentioned, Dar and Nese got a spotlight in the main event of 205 Live that for the past sort of few months they haven't really been afforded. Buddy Murphy's title reign has been fought against the likes of Cedric Alexander, Mustafa Ali, most recently Hideo Itami, and they've kind of dominated the final few segments of 205 Live, whereas these kind of guys have been relegated to the first portion of the show. So it was a slightly surprising main event, but they really lived up to it. Tony Nese picked up the big victory as well, despite Dar's best efforts, and the spot of the match for me was Nese running on the outside and just kneeing Noam Dar's face through the barricade. It looked absolutely brutal, and it was just a great match from top to bottom. I was really impressed by it, and it raises the question in my mind, is Nese next in line for a title shot? I feel like the fact that Nese won this match really boosts him up the pecking order, and I think that he will probably be the next contender for whoever wins the match between Buddy Murphy and Akira Tozawa. For Buddy Murphy. He'll be the next opponent for Buddy Murphy. Let's be realistic right now. Number 6, he's lost a lot of weight, and we really have to hand it to him, and he's really updated his moveset and looks like a totally different wrestler from his heyday back in the Attitude Era. It's Rikishi. What? Ricochet. It's Ricochet. Why is everyone saying his name in that weird way? Ricochet looked really good in the main event of NXT this week, wrestling against Adam Cole, baby. And he basically beat him on one leg. Adam Cole was working the leg viciously throughout this match, and it really paid off because Ricochet got to show off. He's really renowned for his ability to have one of the most amazing offenses in the world of wrestling right now, but an underrated part of Ricochet's game is his selling, his wrestling from the bottom when he's the one being beaten down, and he demonstrated that in this match perfectly. He was hobbling around, he was hitting his already difficult looking moves off one leg. The most notable one in my mind is when he did like a springboard senton, just off one leg, just hopped into it. I cannot imagine the kind of balance and agility and athleticism it takes to pull off a move like that, but it looked damn impressive. And as a little bonus, Ricochet actually won the match too, and then, those are beat down by the other members of the Undisputed Era to close out the show. Boo, you little bastards. But Ricochet looked really good, and I think, if I'm thinking about it in my mind, he's probably, for me, been the most consistent guy this year so far in Wrestlers of the Week 2019. He has looked absolutely on fire. Clearly, the fact that Ospreay won last year has lit a fire inside of, Trevor, and he's starting to think, right, I'm going to really wrestle well over this year, and then maybe I can win Jack's approval. I'm like 99% sure that's what he's thinking. Number 5, the former IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Yes, it's been a bad week for him. I'm sure he's devastated, but he's got 6 points on Wrestlers of the Week to make up for it. Hiroshi Tanahashi. Yes, Tanahashi could go down as one of the most high-profile transitional champions in modern history, because given the triumphant nature of his win at Wrestle Kingdom over Kenny Omega, it's strange to see Tanahashi lose the belt so suddenly at the next big challenge of asking, at the next big title defense he had to make. He lost it. It's pretty crazy, to be honest, especially as this looked like Tanahashi's final big last ride, and it's been really cut short by February. So this was a bit of a surprise for me personally. A lot of people did predict, though, that it would go that way and that he would lose the title. Despite all of that, he put in a very good performance. I saw a lot of mixed opinions on the match online. Watching it myself, I thought it was very good. Maybe not as excellent as some of the more enthusiastic reviewers have said. A lot of people were saying it was a Match of the Year candidate. For me, it falls just short of Match of the Year candidate status, but that's not to take away from either Tanahashi or his opponent. They both wrestled really well. Just for me, there was something a little bit lacking. It wasn't the best match this week for me, personally, but still really good, still worth a watch, especially if you're not a fan of Tanahashi and you want to see him have his little heart broken on a big stage. Jesus, that was a dark ending to that point. Next up, number 4, a man who's already appeared on this list this year already, and someone who picked up a cheeky amount of points last year as well. It's Dragon Gate's Casey. She drives me crazy, and I can't put myself down. I lost confidence in that quickly, very fast. Someone who didn't lose confidence this week was KZ in his challenge for the Open the Dreamgate Championship, the top title over in Dragon Gate. And unfortunately for him, he did come up a little bit short. But again, really, really impressed. Just before talking about Tanahashi, when I was like, this probably wasn't even the best match this week, for me, this was the best match this week, and KZ was one half of it, a very important part of it too. For me, I think one of the reasons that KZ is so good in my eyes is because of my position as an ignorant Westerner who doesn't know too much about Dragon Gate. I'll hold my hands up. But at the same time, I feel as though KZ is really, he doesn't wrestle in the same way, but he's kind of like Naito in that he is one of those wrestlers who, despite the language barrier and everything, just kind of pulls you in. Even if you don't share the same language or culture as him, you can identify with him straight away because he's really charismatic and really captivating in the ring. He did a dance before his opponent had made his entrance, and it was excellent. It was sensual, it was stylish, it was cocky. I like him. He's a bit of a wrong'un, but he wrestles well. He's a good un in the ring and a bit of a cheeky bad boy outside of the ring. He's a lovable babyface, really. Just one point on the end of that as well, on the end of the KZ note. I feel as though I don't know much about Dragon Gate, but someone who does, and someone who's taught me a thing or two about Dragon Gate recently, is bloody UK wrestling hero Martin Kirby. And I think if he was ever to get booked by Dragon Gate, that would just be the best thing ever. So starting now, hashtag Dragon Gate book Martin Kirby, please. That would be lovely. Next up, the new IWGP Heavyweight Champion, Jay White, the Switchblade. Cutting you up. Ooh, that was that was the least threatening thing I've ever done. Yeah, I thought when this match happened that Jay White was a shoe-in for #1 this week, given the enormity of his achievement. I mean, new IWGP Heavyweight Champions don't come around that often. In the past few years, since like 2010, maybe even before, the belt's only been held by a handful of people, basically, is what I'm saying, this decade. So you've got Tanahashi, Okada, Naito, Styles, and Jay White. And Omega. It's only about 6 people or so. So the fact that there is a new, fresh IWGP Heavyweight Champion is major news and really a sign that they're really putting all of their momentum, New Japan are, behind Jay White and really trying to push it. And I think he's in a good position to thrive from that. He doesn't make #1 because, as I say, the match was good, just not as mind-blowing as maybe it could have been. But it was still a really good performance from Jay White, and it's still a very good sign of a bright future for this young New Zealander. I googled his age, actually, in the research for this video, and it sickened me, the answer. He is younger than me by about a week, and he's over in Japan, the hottest wrestler in New Japan right now, the top dog, and I'm here talking about how good he is. It stings a little bit, it stings. So it remains to be seen who will be Jay White's next big opponent, but I suspect he will probably end up main eventing that huge New Japan / Ring of Honor show in Madison Square Garden over WrestleMania weekend. And I believe that match is contested between the champion and the winner of the New Japan Cup. So if Jay White can hold on to the title for the next few months, he should be headlining Madison Square Garden. Not a bad few months at the office, really, for someone who has obviously worked very hard in the New Japan dojo and everything to get to this stage, and it's really, really good to see him reaping the rewards. Next up, #2, and a man who is just on top form, maybe the hottest indie wrestler around right now. It's Pac. Pac, formerly known, of course, as WWE's Neville, has still retained the Open the Dreamgate Championship over in Dragon Gate, defeating the man we talked about at #4, KZ. This match was wrestled at an insane pace. It was fantastic. It was so good. And Pac brought out some moves that I've just not seen before from anyone, really. I don't know what that says about my limited intake of wrestling, but I feel as though I see enough of it to stay on the the cusp of what moves are big at the moment. For example, past few weeks, Canadian Destroyers have been just popping off left, right and centre, and people have been getting a bit annoyed by that because Canadian Destroyers should be used more sparingly in their opinion. I think I agree. These moves were used sparingly in this match from Pac, but they were just so dangerous looking and so thrilling. And I'll tell you what they were. First one was a shooting star press from the top rope. Everyone does that, right? Billy Kidman. But Pac did it onto the back of his standing opponent. So KZ's bent over like that. Neville, Pac's behind him. Shooting star press, bang, landed heavily on his back. I'm sure it was safe, but it looked awesome. The second move was a tombstone pile driver from the top rope, which is just getting a bit too risky now. I feel like one of their mothers should come out and be like, put him down, you've gone too far, your tea's ready, get inside. And finally, #1 and my wrestler of the week, and honestly, one of my boys in the WWE mid-card who always deserves more than he gets, and we could be on the cusp of something great. It's 1/3 of the New Day, Kofi Kingston. If you missed SmackDown this week, you missed something pretty special. There was a big gauntlet match, similar to the one last year where Rollins wrestled for about an hour. There was one this year where Kofi Kingston wrestled for over an hour and just put in one hell of a performance, and he was beating some big names, and this really throws a spanner into the works ahead of the build-up to WrestleMania. Not just Elimination Chamber, but WrestleMania as well on the horizon. So in this gauntlet match, Kofi was the first one out, wrestling Daniel Bryan. They wrestled for about 25 minutes, and Kofi won. He pinned the WWE champion with the Trouble in Paradise. I like the Trouble in Paradise as a move that has the potential to just be a flash knockout, and you can pin anybody with it. That's really awesome to see again. We've seen it used on Randy Orton, but that was like a decade ago now, so it's really cool to see that move have a bit of its potency back. He pinned the WWE champion, for God's sake. Then Jeff Hardy came out as the next opponent. Kofi beat him with the SOS, which he rarely pins people with, but it was cool to see that move be used to put away an opponent. Then Samoa Joe came out, and we all thought it's been a great run for Kofi, but he's not going to beat Samoa Joe. He beat Samoa Joe. Joe locked in the clutch. Kofi did the old Bret Hart where he walked up the turnbuckle, kicked off, and then rolled himself into like a pinning predicament, and Joe didn't let go of the hold in time, and he beat Samoa Joe. Then Joe choked him out of anger, and then Styles was his next opponent. God. And then Styles was like, it's all right, man. Take your time. Just recover. And Kofi, he eventually lost to Styles. He tapped out of the calf crusher, but even in defeat, looked so badass. He was going, no, fight me, I'm ready to go. It was awesome. It's the best we've seen Kofi for so long. I loved it. It was so good. And as I say, this opens up a whole new host of storyline telling avenues for WWE heading into Elimination Chamber. And then, because I don't think he'll win it at Elimination Chamber, but imagine if Kofi gets a title shot at Mania. Imagine. I just want it to happen now. I think that would be absolutely incredible. Come on, Kofi. Yeah, I'm getting emotional, guys. Fully deserving of 10 points and fully deserving of becoming this week's Wrestler of the Week. So without any further ado, it's time to take a look at the league table. It is an insanely tight top 8. We have a new leader in Ricochet. Gargano and Parker 1 point behind him in joint second. Then Jay White at 4th, Becky Lynch in 5th, level with Tanahashi and KZ also in 5th. That's such a tight top 8. Moving down, we see Shun Skywalker, who apparently is Pac's next challenger in Dragon Gate. Then there's Kofi Kingston, this week's winner. Ospreay's down in 19th, last year's winner of course, but he has that huge match with Pac tonight in Rev Pro. I'm just not too certain of when it's going to be available on demand. So that's it for this week on Wrestlers of the Week. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. You can find me on Twitter at Jack the Jobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic and check out our Patreon as well, patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, if you haven't done so already, to hit subscribe and to join us.